What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today, for Top 5 Tuesday, we're going to be talking about the top 5 most versatile picks in Epic 7 RTA. These are units that don't particularly reveal too much about what your strategy is going to be, meaning the opponent can prepare their team properly to try to defend against your combo, allowing you to either finish off with a very good cleave or transition more into more bruiser or tanky draft depending on the situation, and just overall allow you to fit a wide variety of different playstyles while not introducing too many counters to yourself. So if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and join Discord server, link in the description. Without further ado, let's get right into it. And we do have quite a lot of honorable mentions that could easily have been on this list, and as well as the list itself, it's hard to argue for one unit being more versatile than the other, because at the end of the day, they're about the same versatility. So for the most part, take the rankings with a grain of salt. It's not really a ranking, it's more of like, this is my opinion, although easily one could be over the other, and that could very much happen. So if you have a different idea, please let me know in the comments. But with that, let's first start with the honorable mentions, starting with none other than Summertime Iseria. This unit has become a juggernaut recently in Epic 7 RTA. She's starting to slowly become a top tier unit, even starting to be played almost every single draft higher up in RTA. Why? Well, because of how versatile she actually is, and because of how much good support she actually has now. The big support units are actually going to be Cerise and the most recent unit, Ran, which actually put her on the map. But you still have units like Felis who can still fit with her in a bruiser draft and still allowing you to put a ton of pressure. She's able to CR push your team up. She's able to do a bunch of damage with the bombs. She's able to S1 strip and apply the bombs herself, so she doesn't particularly need a stripper. And on top of all that, she's able to stun, right? So she can either pivot in a control draft, in a cleave draft, and our worst case scenario, she can still fit in a bruiser draft. She could easily be a very, very powerhouse unit, and this is why a lot of people are picking her, particularly early on, because Cerise and Summertime Iseria don't necessarily force you into a cleave. You could easily go with a more control draft or with a more bruiser draft, which is what makes Summer Iseria such an incredible unit, aside just from how strong bombs can land when she has her artifact maxed out, and just how hard it is to deal with a 100% stun chance if you are able to land your bombs. Just very, very, very hard to deal with. Even cleansers have a hard time dealing with her because she can detonate those bombs herself, and a cleanser is not going to do anything if your team is dead, right? So that's one of the reasons. Honestly, could easily be on this list. The other one is going to be the slot machine units and a lot of the DPSs. The slot machine units, you guys should know by now who they are, and it's essentially going to be Violet and Rem. So why? These units are just DPSs that are hard to take out but can also do good damage. Violet, incredibly hard to kill, right? Not a lot of counters, if at all, like realistic counters. Very, very hard to actually counter him. So a lot of people will pick him even early on and potentially go with a cleave. And then what ends up happening is the opponent has to guard against your cleave, which means they're not picking counters to Violet, and Violet will usually end up soloing the team or is being forced to ban. And that applies a lot of draft pressure, which is why he's so annoying. Just a slot machine unit. By the same place, we do also have Rem. The same idea, again, similar idea to Violet. You're picking her, you could potentially go for bruiser, you potentially go for cleave. If they overcommit to countering her, then they get cleaved. If they don't counter her, then they're forced to ban her, right? So again, very versatile unit. She can fit in cleaves, she can fill in aggro drafts, and she can definitely be annoying if you're trying to anti-cleave, because if you hit and she procs as S2, they get a bunch of damage for free. There's other units that I'm not going to spend as much time talking about, which is going to be things like Stene, who's another really good DPS, Landy, who again fits into a wide variety of team compositions, Airtel Tenebria, who can easily pivot between a wide variety of different teams, whether it's bruiser, cleave, or control. Still one of the most dangerous last pick units in the game. And of course, someone like Angel of Light Angelica, who for the most part is going to be an aggressive draft, which is why she actually didn't go higher on this list. It's just because she's usually best put in an aggressive draft, right? That is usually her best place, is either control draft or a booster draft. For some of the other units, it's like they fit pretty much everywhere and are really hard to count. So with that, let's actually move to the actual list. I know this was a massive honorable mentions, but there's just so many good units right now that you have to watch out for, and that can easily draft into different type of team compositions. But now we move on to number 5, and we have none other than Felis. Felis, with time, keeps becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, and she fits into so many team compositions just because she's one of the best counter units in the game. Why is that? Well, if you're fighting cleave, that means that you're able to cut their CR gain. If they do real on CR, you're able to come in, give them a big hit, potentially stun them if you're on Abyssal Crown, or strip them if you're on Lullaby Lin. Both very, very debilitating debuff, or things that can happen. And on top of that, you can also come in with an S3 right after when you cut, and apply some really nasty debuffs, and she does a very good surprising amount of damage, as well as being able to carry her own book to potentially soul burn and kill. The amount of times I've lost to solo DPS Polides is more than I would like to admit. She's definitely just a very, very versatile unit. It's just if the opponent has a non-attack skill, whether that's a Maid Chloe, an Amelia, a cleave type unit, a Rand, there's so many situations, even things like Langi, right? She just fits, right? And you can draft anything else you want with her, because at the end of the day, she's a counter pick unit that can do damage, right? And most damage dealers tend to be very, very versatile. In Cleave, she carries her own book, does good damage. In Bruiser, she does great damage and counters things that could potentially kill you. And in Control, I mean, you saw how disgusting these debuffs are. And with S2, with Summer Sarah, you could potentially even use her for anti-cleave with Summer Sarah as well, very, very easily. So again, just a very, very versatile unit. You usually see her being slapped on right when her opponent puts a unit that she can counter, and then you can draft anything else, right? You slap on, it's a counter, and she fits pretty much everywhere, which is what makes Polides such an incredibly good unit. Now at number 4, we have a knight that's honestly becoming a really, really big powerhouse knight, and if you have this unit, you should highly consider picking it. But it is going to be none other than Crimson Armin at number 4. Crimson Armin has just become such an annoying unit because she is a one night double damage mitigation type unit. And realistically, you can't really counter what she does. If she's on the board, she is applying her damage mitigation, right? She's already doing her job. She can do absolutely nothing else but be on the board, and she's doing her job, right? And it makes the team, allows your team to have a lot more flexibility, because you can put other knights that could potentially do more damage that are not on damage mitigation artifacts, allowing you to do a wide variety of different playstyles. She's a cornerstone for the aggro build, because she just legit denies the opponent a turn if they don't have a way to strip her. You just come in, you do an S3, you deny the opponent a turn, as well as setting up immunity. And if you're fighting her, using her in a very aggressive draft with a lot of squishy units, you have her speed tune right, and you have your turn ordering right, you can do your initial burst and then hunker down, and your opponent cannot retaliate against you. Right, so just because she's such a generalist unit, she's extremely versatile. She fits in every single draft, right? As long as it's not like a full tank draft. That's the only thing that doesn't do too much, because I mean, she's already bringing all the damage mitigation you could ever ask for. You don't have to pick her in a pentatank knight type draft. And that's the only place you don't really see her, is a pentatype draft. But in aggro you see her, in Bruiser you see her, some people cleave with her, in anti-cleave you see her. Just an overall extremely, extremely versatile knight that just is able to just put so much freaking pressure on the board and just be such an annoying knight to deal with, right? Just so much mitigation, right? This, along with an Aureus, you have all the damage mitigation you could ever ask for, right? And it's very hard to get out of a Crimson Armin wall. And it's very, very easy for you to go hyper aggressive, because now you don't have to pick 2 knights to get the double knight mitigation. You have 1 knight that does everything for you. But with that, let's move on to the number 3. And we have another set of support units. I couldn't really decide which one will be better than the other, so I put them both in the same location. But it's going to be Amelia as well as Maid Chloe. And why are they so versatile? Because at the end of the day, they're healers, they are cleansers, and they are attack buffers. And they also are sustain type units, with Maid Chloe probably being the more versatile one than Amelia. But let's talk about both really quickly. So Maid Chloe is arguably, if you ask me who I think the strongest unit in the game is, I would still say it's Maid, because she has very limited counters, right? Polides being one of them, which makes Polides such a good unit. But why is Maid so good? She does everything. You can put her in every single team, and your team is significantly better because you had a Maid Chloe, right? And that's the power of Maid Chloe. Essentially what she does is cleanse. So against control, extremely good into control, because you can just full team cleanse if you have enough ER. She gives attack buff, right? Not full team cleanse, it's a 2 debuff cleanse, but for the most part, that's for most debuffs, it's pretty good, except for Samurai Seria, and because Samurai Seria can pop the debuffs, and against highly debuff type teams, right? But for the most part, she's one of the premier counters to Langi right now. But again, you're able to cleanse 2 debuffs. Sorry, I had to make the clarification, because I already see someone saying, oh, she's not that good into very heavy debuff teams. For most debuff teams that only rely on 1 debuff per unit, she's really, really good. She also gives attack buff, which is invaluable in today's day and age, because that's amazing for bruisers, that's amazing for aggro, cleave, and on top of that, you revive, meaning if you're playing with this squishy team, right, with an aggro type draft, even with the cleave type draft, if your units die, you can just bring them back, and then you can just do it all over again, right? So she's just a massive support. And then on top of all that, because she's so bulky and anti-cleaving, she's not going to die easily, and you're able to bring back your allies and they're not going to kill her unless they have something like a Watcher Shuri. And even then, some Watcher Shuris can't kill certain mates, right? Unless they have attack buff. And to top it all off, in a Bruiser matchup, Smilegate decided to give her the most toxic thing on this planet, which is a stun on the S1. And on top of all that, also gives you a nice little CR push to all your allies. And on top of all that, you can soul burn it to get an extra turn to cycle through your revive better. It's just very, very toxic. It stuns DPS type units, gains you massive advantage, and just makes her incredibly toxic to deal with. But the big reason she's so versatile is because of the revive, it's because of the attack buff, and it's because of the healing. She makes teams bulkier by just being there, and also supports them and gives them attack buff, right? She's just a premier support. But that same means we have Amelia, who's more for the aggressive side. She also is really good for Bruiser, but the thing that Amelia doesn't have that Maid does is that anti-cleave counter. If you pick an Amelia and a DPS, you are very squishy and you are extremely likely to get blown up, right? She doesn't have the revive buff that Maid has, but she's a little bit more aggressive with Maid, being able to give that CR push. So again, honestly, Maid is probably more deserving of the spot because she can actually do everything. Anti-control, anti-cleave, Bruiser, aggro, tank, do your taxes. She does everything. Like, she literally does everything. She's a very, very extremely versatile unit. Again, the only place is like maybe very hyper aggressive cleave she's not that good for, but that's it, right? That's the only place that Maid Chloe probably doesn't shine in hyper aggressive team. But now we move on to number 2, and we actually have a DPS that is honestly becoming stronger and stronger and does get a banner quite soon, and that is going to be none other than a Raivi. Cleavers have started picking up a Raivi. Anti-cleavers have started picking up a Raivi. Bruisers have started to pick up a Raivi. Why? She is a Bruiser that is hard to take out, that can sustain, and that does an insane amount of damage and has a revive. Very similar to Maid, but the fact is that she's also a DPS type unit, making her extremely, extremely versatile. She has very few counters, with the only one in Bruiser being LQC, being able to just blow her up. And aside from that, just control, right? Because she does get debuff down quite easily, but she's even then, she's able to cycle quite quickly, right? So it's more of those Cerise type Samurai Seria teams that are very, very powerful right now, that can actually put a damper on Apocalypse Raivi, but at the same time, she's also really good into them because she can cycle so good. And if you have her on Crimson Seed and she's able to cleanse a lot of these debuffs, she'll be able to kill and revive, and those teams typically are not able to actually kill her, right? Which is what makes a Raivi such a hard unit to deal with, because she's just bulky and does damage, right? She's the perfect definition of what you want from a Bruiser. Someone that can survive, she gets CR push, she gets healing, someone that does damage, and yeah, that's all you really need, right? Sustain, damage, and cycling, right? If you have those 3 things, you have an amazing Bruiser on your hands, and she does all 3. People pick her in cleave because you take away the cleave counter, as well as you can easily put in a Bruiser draft. So again, extremely versatile, can fit into a wide variety of teams, also really good at against anti-cleave, decent, okay-ish against anti-control. That's considered to be one of her counters. But again, not a lot of counters for a very, very good DPS that also allows you to go into a wide variety of different teams, right? Which is what makes a Raivi such an incredibly good unit, and just an all-round good DPS type unit. I definitely pick her up a lot, and every time I pick her, I'm like, man, this unit's really good. And she just pairs off with so many good units well. For Bruiser, like Ross, and for Cleave, she just does dummy damage. You give her a speed set build, and you give her the Rem artifact that allows it to CR push, and she's just going to be cutting and doing it. So Apocalypse Raivi, extremely versatile, fits in so many situations. And last but definitely not least, looking back at this list, I honestly should have put her lower, but we have none other than Fallen Cecilia. The only reason why I put her this high is because she is an incredibly good pivot draft type unit. And again, pivot draft unit, if you're not too sure what that means, that's something that's going to be a video in the future. But pivot drafts essentially mean that you are pretending to do one thing and then you completely do the other, and your opponent is absolutely screwed. And Fallen Cecilia cleaves are some of the hardest things on this planet to actually deal with, which is why cleavers are actually first picking Fallen Cecilia a lot of the times. Why? Well, at her core, what she's doing is giving you a nice barrier, right? And this is huge in cleave because one of the biggest counters to cleave is actually Sage Ball. But if you have her with your units on immunity, Sage Ball doesn't do anything, right? Sage Ball is not going to sleep you. Sage Ball becomes a non-factor, right? The other things, it's like a lot of speed contesters rely on actually killing you, right? Think of even someone like a Sid. But how are you going to kill a cleave unit through a thick 30k Fallen Cecilia barrier that's essentially giving them an extra 4.5 KD, right? Very, very hard, right? That you're not going to get through that, right? So she is just incredibly good in cleaves. But the thing about it is you can't just pick anti-cleave, because if you start picking anti-cleave when you see a Fallen Cecilia get dropped, you're going to get destroyed by a Bruiser draft, because she's also a cornerstone for Bruiser draft, because she just makes teams unnaturally tanky with her barrier, as well as just cycling through and provoking you down, right? And on top of all that, her S3 damage is extremely high, and she gets skill modifier, again, allowing you to survive a lot longer in the future. So she's just a defensive juggernaut, and arguably the strongest starting defensive unit in the game. There are units that actually counter her, and you do introduce some other counters by picking her, such as Operator Cigarette. But at the end of the day, if you're someone that has multiple draft choices, she's probably one of your best friends. If you're a cleaver, you're probably first picking her, right? Because if you first pick her and the opponent just starts going standard Bruiser, then you cleave them, right? But then if the opponent starts going anti-cleave, you just Bruiser them, right? It's very, very hard to respond to a Fallen Cecilia first pick because you have zero information of what your opponent's going to do. Whereas some of the other units kind of maybe give you an idea and you can counter the unit a little bit harder. Fallen Cecilia, it's not like she's not actually the problem. It's usually her teammates, but she enables all her teammates. So again, incredibly powerful unit for first pick, just extremely versatile, which is why she's been the queen of first pick in RTA for such a long time, and why she was in Arena for such a long time as a dominant unit for like over a year, right? And it shows why, right? Just a defensive juggernaut, being able to give you that initial advantage so you don't get one shot early, being able to switch between cleave because our S3 does damage, does really good freaking damage on S3, just because it has good HP scaling. And again, just allowing you to draft your pivots very well. Extremely versatile unit. But that is going to be all I have for you guys today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and y'all are able to use some of these extremely versatile units in your draft to draft and cook up some very good wins and get your skin for the season. But that's all I got for you guys today, and I will see you next time. Peace.